In this video, we'll be briefly teaching you about the key concepts of learning theory. Learning is a means by which an organism can bring about a change in behaviour that is either temporary or permanent. This video will acknowledge the behaviourist theory and why psychologists believe that humans behave the way they do. Ivan Pavlov was a behaviourist psychologist, primarily interested in classical conditioning. He was born on the 14th of September 1849 in a small village in Russia where his father was a priest. His earliest studies focused on theology, and he was particularly interested in Charles Darwin. However, he quickly abandoned this, along with his religious beliefs, to take on his main passion, science. In 1870, he began studying natural sciences at St. Petersburg University. Pavlov was particularly interested in human behaviour and the science behind this. Therefore, he conducted an experiment into learning behaviour. Pavlov investigated human behaviour using animal studies with dogs. The dogs would salivate on presentation of food, and so Pavlov rang a bell alongside the presentation of food so the dogs would associate food with the ringing bell. The dogs therefore learnt to salivate when presented with the ringing bell and not the food. This was referred to as classical conditioning. Pavlov received considerable acclaim for his work, including the 1904 Nobel Prize in Physiology. Pavlov's work can be praised for its scientific nature. The experiment was highly controlled and so produced valid and reliable results. Although, ethically, Pavlov's study would not be replicated because of its use of animals. Further, we cannot generalise the behaviour of an animal to a behaviour of a human. Pavlov's work is also highly deterministic. He assumes humans have no free will and that all our behaviour is learnt through classical conditioning. Furthermore, the behaviourism approach is reductionist. This is because it assumes all humans are a clean slate and we learn everything through our experiences. It doesn't consider cognitive and biological factors. We may even behave the way we do because of our genes. There are also practical applications to classical conditioning. For example, it helps us explain phobias. Watson and Rayner conducted an experiment on a child referred to as Little Albert. Albert wasn't initially afraid of white rats, but they wanted him to develop a fear. The white rat was therefore the neutral stimulus. Something that did make Albert scared was the sound of a hammer banging on a steel bar, so this was the unconditioned stimulus, and his fear initially was the unconditioned response. Then the rat was presented with the loud noise of the hammer, and it produced an unconditioned response, which was fear. Eventually, when the rat was presented alone, it became the conditioned stimulus, and the fear became a conditioned response. Albert therefore learnt through classical conditioning to be afraid of the white rat. This theory has also led us to develop treatments of phobias such as systematic desensitisation and flooding. However, it is important to note that the study does raise ethical issues because Albert was not protected from harm. Now we are going to talk about another type of conditioning called operant conditioning, which is presented by Skinner. Skinner was born in Pennsylvania in 1904. He initially was interested in writing and had a BA in English. He later decided to go back to studying and get a master's degree in psychology, and a year later his PhD from Harvard. He studied the role of reinforcements and the results of positive and negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement refers to taking something negative away from a situation, and this means that you will repeat the good behaviour as you will want to avoid something that you don't like. Positive reinforcement refers to giving rewards. This again enforces that behaviour is repeated as the individual wants the reward. Punishment is a negative consequence which enforces the behaviour to not be repeated. Using these, Skinner could teach animals to learn via punishment training and how to avoid dangerous situations. He conducted experiments to test operant conditioning, and this involved placing rats in a box with a feeding tube connected to a lever. Once the rats realised that once they pressed the lever, they were given food. This was the reward. Skinner noticed they frequently used the lever, and so this supported the idea of positive reinforcement. In regards to negative reinforcement, Skinner wanted to test that too. So he forced electric shocks when rats didn't press the lever, given a cue. This supports negative reinforcement, as the electric shock would not be enforced when the rats pressed the lever. To conclude, this video should have informed you about the basics of classical and operant conditioning, with some information about the key psychologists behind it all. Thank you.